Welcome to the Emotionally Healthy Leader podcast. My name is Rich Velotis. I am the lead pastor of New Life Fellowship Church here in Queens, New York City. And I'm here, as always, with Pete Scazzero. Pete is the founder of New Life Fellowship Church, as well as the founder of Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. And we've been talking about content from the book, The Emotionally Healthy Leader. We began our podcast series looking at the inner life. Last time we started talking about the outer life as it pertains to planning and decision making. We're going to continue this theme about the outer life now, Pete, as we talk about culture and team building. And really the premise of this chapter is that to create an emotionally healthy culture and to build a healthy team is the primary task of every leader. And how do we do that well? And so you have a story about a tiger that really gives a nice illustration to what we're going to talk about today. Why don't you share about that?
Actually, this chapter on culture and team building begins with a story that comes from Edwin Friedman. He's he's a rabbi that kind of pioneered family systems thinking for synagogues and churches. Anyway, he tells a story. It's a fable of a friendly forest where there's all these animals. They're all getting along just fine, but at some point, a tiger joins the community. And one of the sheep is like, this is not good, like tigers, like, you know. But they said, it'll be fine, we're a friendly forest. Make a long story short, the tiger keeps threatening and, kind of behind bushes, be growling, and the sheep would complain, and the leadership said, listen, please, this tiger. And they said, get over it, let's have a conversation, let's dialogue about it. Until it finally gets to the point where the sheep says, I have to leave the community, I can't stay here anymore. And blah, 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 a little crisis, and at the end, one of the other animals says, what do you do with the tiger? You cage the bloody tiger. In other words, leadership needed to take responsibility for the culture. And there are, at times, persons or situations that are toxic. They're just toxic. And if leadership doesn't contain it and take responsibility to create healthy culture and teams, that culture and team will be basically, I don't think the word destroyed, but power is given to someone who should not get it. And because I didn't like confrontation in the early years, it had to get really bad for me to confront it and deal with it. But I would let things go on for years because I didn't understand the importance of leadership in creating culture and healtty teams. And I love the story because I'm in churches all the time that like, hey, you're responsible for the culture. There is nobody else. I mean, you're the leader of that team. And I know it's hard, but if you don't do it, there are going to be consequences down the road.
So this thing about building a culture, it's massive. I mean, if we don't address this, it's bad news here. So you talk about 4 characteristics for emotionally healthy culture and team building. And there's 4 of them, so let's just go one by one and unpack them a little bit for us. So the first one is that work performance and spiritual formation are inseparable. That is, in an emotionally healthy culture, work performance and personal spiritual formation are inseparable. Unpack that a little bit.
So, in fact, let me just say this before we go into this specifically, because defining culture is quite difficult. It's kind of, quote, the way we do things around here. And I've read a whole bunch of books that could define culture. I talked to some global experts who work at businesses and culture and all that. So it's still difficult to define. But it's kind of like that ethos. There's a nice 3-4 paragraphs in there that are tight in the book that define it. But just think of culture as it's kind of like that air we breathe. It's like it's the way we do things. You can feel it when you're inside of an organization or a church or a family. So there's lots of things we can choose because everything, when we say, what do we isolate to create healthy culture and teams? I ended up with 4, but in a sense, everything creates culture. So you show up at 10 o'clock and you go home at 2 o'clock. It creates culture. So what you wear creates culture, what you don't wear. I mean, everything's creating culture. So I'm always, I think as leadership, not that we're under a yoke, but we're very aware that we're shaping and leading by the way that we live our lives. We give who we possess. So anyway, I ended up on 4 things that I thought at New Life Fellowship, as I pondered us, that I think make our culture here, we're not perfect, but has some element of health to it and some healthy teams as well. So anyway, the first is
work performance and personal spiritual formation being inseparable.
It's that we're concerned not just with a person being able to do a job. Okay, you're videoing, you're you're a pastor on our staff, are you getting it done? You're meeting your objectives and your goals. That we're also concerned about their relationship with Christ. How are you doing? How are your rhythms with Christ? We're not assuming anything. And so we're actually keeping the two closely knit together. We know that you give out of who you are, not just what you do. And we cannot give what we don't possess. So therefore, the commitment that we have, I think, at New Life is we invest in people's spiritual development. I think has been very, it makes it a joy for people to be on staff. And maybe you could talk about what are some things that you do and we do as a staff now to cultivate people's formation within their jobs.
Yeah. I can think of 4 things we do that I think has contributed to a healthy culture where New Life is not just they don't just see me as a cog in a machine, as a means to an end, that we're deeply concerned about their personal formation. I think, first of all, every staff member gets a development budget. So first of all, you have X amount of money every year to think through your own personal development. And in conjunction with your supervisor, you're thinking, this is my plan for the year of how I'm going to grow as a follower of Christ and in my role as well. Sabbath, as just we want to protect the time and limits of every staff person. And so it is agreed upon that if this is your Sabbath, it would have to be such an emergency, so drastic, that we would contact you on the Sabbath day. And so we want to protect every staff member's 24-hour period of Sabbath, where this is your time to stop, rest, delight, and contemplate. The third Wednesday of every month, our staff takes a day alone with God. And I've heard many different pastors and friends hear about this, that you pay your people to pray, essentially.
Yes.
And it's just like, yes, we pay our people to have a life with God. Yes. And it almost sounds like counterintuitive. No, we pay them to do a job, yeah, but it flows out of who they are. So every third Wednesday of the month, there's a day alone with God. And then every staff member putting together a rule of life. That we're really serious about their discipleship. Every staff members, how are you growing in every dimension of your life? What's your rule? And so those are some of the things that we've done through the years here at New Life.
And I think we have a good sensitivity culturally that as your ministry grows and develops, you need new rhythms. In other words, what worked for you at one phase of your leadership is not going to work at the next phase.
Yeah.
And so even for yourself right now, as lead pastor, as the church continues to grow, you need to adjust your rhythm so that you're getting what you need for your formation and investing in it, because there's so many demands coming at you right now. You could easily compromise on it.
Case in point, I typically take the third Wednesday of each month and do a day alone with God. And I realized that with everything coming at me, I needed a couple of days every other month or so. Yeah. And so I've scheduled a rhythm where I go away to a retreat every other month to spend a day and a half, 2 days in silence and in solitude to think through all of the issues that are before me. But it adjusts with different responsibilities and different levels of demands.
And just, Jerry and I, we're in, we have a development budget here at New Life, and so we are investing in ourselves in the fall. We're going to a 5-day conference on sexuality. And because we feel like it's such a cutting edge issue for the future of the culture. And we need our own development as we seek to serve other people. So you don't ever stop doing this thing of your formation development.
Yeah. And again, going back to the theme almost of the emotionally healthy leader is, in order to do this, it takes time.
It's true. It's coming back to time, doesn't it?
It takes time. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, emotionally healthy culture is based on the elephants in the room are acknowledged and confronted. Very similar to that tiger story you just said.
It is.
Elephants in the room are acknowledged and confronted.
Yeah, so what that looks like is things happen, and rather than see them as interruptions, you realize these are opportunities for discipleship. So one of the videos on our website, Emotionally Healthy Leader, is on the skill climb the ladder of integrity. And so, for example, one of our staff, Phil, was very poor at conflict. And he was always happy and nice guy and all that. But the elephant in the room was, we have a guy who doesn't do conflict. And that's a real problem when you're in leadership. That's an elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to go away. So to have to unearth that and unpack it from his family of origin, his culture, It was a large task, and it took months and months to actually get him to actually do it for the first time. Again, with someone older than himself, which culturally was, a rule that you don't break. But he has grown, as you know, the last few years, a lot in his ability to do it. But that was an elephant in the room because we knew enough to know this was a big problem. It could be anything from a person showing up late all the time or getting all these traffic tickets, but things happen that we knew we don't say anything. We just silent and we kind of hope it goes away, we move on.
Yeah.
In an emotionally healthy culture, in a loving, kind way, we talk about it. We pull the person aside. We're asking to serve them, not to come at them, but we're not afraid of where it might lead. Because sometimes these things do lead to tough places. And I know a number of situations where folks don't want to ask about people's singleness or marriages or sexuality because they don't want to know where it could possibly go. Or a possibly addictive behavior. And if we don't know, then it's like it's going to go away.
Right.
But in a healthy culture and team, you actually you ask, you go after it.
So elephants in the room are acknowledged. Third is time and energy are invested into the team's personal spiritual development. Some of what I just talked about.
I think so, yeah, because it does take time. The point is when you confront an elephant in the room, first you want to always anticipate it, right? So we're always equipping our staff, I think, to be more solid in Christ. But that time that you talked about in the last podcast about the staff meetings and taking time at a retreat, half the time to actually invest in their development. But we're books, you're handing books to people, your resources, the articles, but I think there's a real culture here that I think we've modeled, and I think our people are doing it with their people on their teams. That's a really healthy culture of, if you're in serving in leadership at any level here, we hope you're growing. We want to be feeding you extra. We can't pay you, because lots of volunteers are getting paid, but the remuneration is growth in Christ, investment.
Yeah. And then last here, we have that in an emotionally healthy culture, an emotionally healthy team building, the quality of people's marriages and singleness is foundational. Now, in typical culture, work culture, you work for IBM, you work for Apple, I highly doubt that they're saying, by the way, how's it going with your marriage? There's no time for that. You got to get the job done. But in an emotionally healthy culture, why are we asking the question about the quality of someone's marriage or singleness?
It's interesting you say that, because I think you're right. You have secular culture, which could care. You can be having affairs, it's fine. I think Christian culture is, standard Christian culture is, we may ask, just tell us everything's okay. That you're not having an affair, or if you're single, you're not, or you're not in pornography, or if you're single, you're not sleeping around. We have a basic low standard that we trust people are maintaining. But our question about, when we say in a healthy, emotionally healthy culture and team, that we're asking about marriage and singleness, we have a theology that comes out of the Inner Life, which is an earlier chapter in the book, that we lead out of the integrity of our marriages and singleness. We have a theology of it, that you can't give what you don't possess. It's a vocation to be married. It's a vocation to be single. And that is the essence of your person. And to think that we can compartmentalize that from your leadership is foolishness. And that to have a transformed church requires transformed marriages and singles. So I think for us at New Life, it comes out of a theology. And we are concerned about spouses. We want to know to the spouse, how are you? We find out a lot when you just ask a spouse of a staff person, how are you? Or a key volunteer or board member. But we don't let that lie unaddressed when issues come up, because we want people to have great marriages and great singleness, have a life outside of leadership. That's culture. We don't want you working 80 hours a week here. It's not healthy for you, it's not healthy for our church. So I think that people have wanted to come on staff here for that alone, because they know they'll be cared for as people, I think as singles or marrieds. And I think you've carried that on for sure. Peter, earlier, you can tell about Peter Roden, one of our staff, who runs all your pastoral staff.
Peter is a bulldog. Peter, he's been on staff for about 20 years himself in different roles. And now he oversees our pastoral community and community life as a whole. But Peter is, he's going to get into the lives of our leaders and ask them how you're doing. And he's deeply concerned about whether your marriage, your singleness is going well or not. Because ultimately, not just theologically, then very practically, the issues at home, at one way or another, are going to influence
Yes.
what's happening at work.
Yes.
And so then it becomes an elephant in the room that we have to address.
And we help marriages. We help marriages and singles strengthen themselves. I mean, I think we invest in that for people because we're that committed to whether getting them into groups or therapy or counseling, but it's a very big commitment, I think, for us here as a